Right, thank you very much. Really pleased to see a lot of people online for this talk. So Catriona Spaven-Donn is the Fundraising Manager for the Peruvian Youth Development NGO Amantani, and she previously completed MPhil in Latin American Studies at the University of Cambridge and is currently studying outdoor environmental education while establishing her own art and agroecology project in the Maya Ixil region of Guatemala. Yes, great, and thank you very much for coming up. So you come up to London today. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you for being here in person and online. It's really great to be here with CELCE and to really share the same kind of vision in terms of working on participatory youth programs, or working at the kind of nexus of endangered languages, cultures, and ecosystems. Today I'm going to talk a bit about the concept of Ayni at Amantani, and that revolves around Andean reciprocity within our participatory youth programs.
You can minimize that a little bit as well. Minimize that.
Okay. So within this kind of half an hour, 40 minutes, or an hour, however long we have, there's kind of three main components that I'd like to touch on, which includes Ayni as a concept within Quechua language and culture in the Andes of Peru. Amantani, which is the Peruvian youth development organization I work with as fundraising manager, and then participatory approaches in youth programming more broadly. Amantani began 15 years ago in the Andes of Peru, just outside of Cusco, in a community called Corta. It's a UK registered youth development organization. We also now work in the Amazon rainforest in the Loreto region of Peru, which is where this photo is. I don't know if you can see that online, but yes, we've been working for 15 years to defend the rights of Indigenous young people through enabling access to high quality education and fair employment. We also run an ethical trade program, so we have some bracelets here today. You can get them, those people who are online, you can just get in touch with me afterwards. And a participatory media project. We'll also be watching one of the short films that was created by one of the young people in our programs, and that's with our Meet My World program. I wanted also to kind of set the context a bit in telling you that fewer than 1 in 5 young people in rural Peru access further or higher education. And really what we're doing, our vision and mission, is to reduce that stark divide between rural and urban populations. So the Transitions project that Amantani offers to young people in the Andean region, in the Guarca district and Guanaquiting, started initially back in 2008 as an organization serving children who had to walk huge distances from their homes to school. And so Corca, in the community of Corca, we started a boarding house, which is now our Corca campus. And at that time, 2007-2008, there were only 35 students in the secondary school in Corca. In 2018, when our Transitions project came about and we kind of pivoted our focus as an organization, there were 225 students in the secondary school. So at that point, the community asked, what happens to the school leavers? What's next? How does that gap of fewer than 1 in 5 young people accessing further education become something which is now turned into a success story? And that is what the Transitions project looks to do, in that 130 participants over around the last 5-6 years have now gone on to study at institutes or universities or colleges in Cusco, in the city of Cusco. And the first part of that, before Amantani supports with scholarships and psychosocial support and tutoring, is the Pathways program, which offers workshops on personal development, on vocational orientation, on sexual and reproductive health and comprehensive sexuality education, and environmental awareness as well. And I was lucky enough in July and August to be able to be part of that Pathways program, which runs for 2 weeks as a residential course in our Corca campus. And so some of the stories that I want to share with you today are anecdotes and stories that I shared with those young people in person in Corca. And that's okay, I think it's going to work. So also actually I'm just going to go back. Here we can also see the last line here mentions that part of our holistic approach is to engage parents and have a whole family approach to young people's education. And in kind of linking that to our programs more broadly, like the Meet My World program, I thought that Ayni, a program participant, could tell that story much better than I can, and I'd like to share a film with you all.
I hope they can hear this.
I hope you can hear it.
Hola, soy Jenny. Esta vez quiero contarles sobre el trabajo de la chacra. Antes de empezar la siembra se hace una tinca a los sapos. Con coca en un plato de barro. Se hace una costa de ganado. Y allí se pone el punto, grasa de llama y el incienso que lo compramos en Cusco. Esta es una necesidad que tenemos en la familia. Pero al hacerla en grupo, hablando, escuchando música, haciendo bromas, no se siente el cansancio. Te relajas, te diviertes y a la vez ayudas. En el mes de octubre se realiza la siembra mayor para el consumo. Pero cuando hay buena producción, lo hacemos para la venta en Cusco. Durante la siembra, las personas mayores te dan consejos. A mí me gustaría compartir un consejo que es uno de mis tíos. Él me dijo, sigue adelante con tus estudios, no importa la edad y no digas antes de tiempo no puedo. Este es mi segundo año como presidenta del albergue. El grupo me apoya y también las profesoras.
Jenny,
También tenemos más confianza con mi hermana Ayni y hablamos de todo.
Jenny created this video as one of our productions of the Meet My World program, which was short films written and created by some people back in 2016. And that's something that I'll also speak a wee bit about at the end. But in the meantime, I thought that was a really good example of Ayni in practice. So Ayni is a Quechua word. It means reciprocity, interdependence, cooperation, balance, solidarity within the wider context of the Andean cosmovision. It refers to mutualism between all forms of life and the exchange of energy that sustains humans and nature. Historically, Ayni might have been a labour exchange like the one we just saw in the chapka or in the fields. And it's also one of the values of Amantani as an organisation, as is interculturality, youth participation, and social justice. And I also thought it would be interesting to speak a bit more about interculturality, which is a really important value within Indigenous communities in Latin America. And there's an important distinction to be made there between multiculturalism and interculturality. I've been really impacted by the research of Maria Elena Garcia, who writes on identities, education, and Indigenous development in Peru. And she writes, multiculturalism is the recognition of a reality. Peru is a country of a diverse cultural and linguistic makeup. Interculturalidad, or interculturality, is the practice of multiculturalism, in which citizens reach across cultural and linguistic differences to imagine a democratic community. In that vein, bilingual intercultural education is the mechanism par excellence used to foster cultural unity out of multicultural difference. And she then goes on in a kind of maybe more visual way of thinking about this difference. That multiculturalism is to know that you have neighbours who are different from you, but interculturalidad is when you and your neighbours hold hands to keep each other up. And this also relates to the Andean way of viewing the world and living in the world, called Sumak Kausai in Quechua, or Vivir Bien, living well, which probably many of you have already heard about. And that could be thought of as an alternative path to development. A worldview in which well-being is the overarching goal. Social and cultural relationships are valued, and humans and nature are understood to be intimately and intricately interconnected. So now that we've seen also what the work in the chakra looks like, I also wanted to ground that sort of cultural reality within the linguistic reality of Quechua. And I thought I would show this slide from the Endangered Languages Project of southern Peru, where Cusco is. And I don't know if you can make out either in the room or online that many of these dots of different languages and varieties of endangered. The Endangered Languages Project prefaces its work in protecting and promoting languages in saying humanity is facing a massive extinction. Languages are disappearing at an unprecedented rate, and when that happens, with every language that dies, we lose an enormous cultural heritage. The understanding of how humans relate to the world around us, scientific, medical, and botanical knowledge, and most importantly, we lose the expression of communities' humor, love, and life. In short, we lose the testimony of centuries of life. I thought that was also really related to the work of CELCE and all of the good work that you're doing in working in this context with languages around the world. In Peru, there are 48 languages spoken and over 1 million children studying in intercultural bilingual education programs, which means that they're assessed in their reading and literacy, both in Spanish and in their indigenous language. And the map here shows southern Peru, which is mostly Quechua Collao and Quechua Chanca. So there are lots of different varieties of Quechua, and this chart here from the Peruvian Ministry of Culture's database of indigenous languages shows that many are seriously in danger. And even those that say vital are also in danger, in that transmission of languages is often not being passed down to the next generation. And while there are 4.5 million speakers of Quechua, and it's the most spoken indigenous language in the Americas, there is a real necessity for thinking about how to embed interculturalidad and interculturality within youth programs. So when I was in Corta and had the opportunity to be part of the Pathways program alongside 28 young people, I saw some of the work that was done by my team members and the tutors of Amantani and the young people themselves in thinking about all that their cultural identity means to them. They work together on posters like this one, in which they're recording in Quechua the names of their crops, when their rainy seasons are, and the changes in climate that they're seeing as well in their local environment. They also put up words on the wall and discuss together what it means to them. You can't quite make it out, but they say pueblos originarios, first peoples, territorio, territory, autoorganización, self-organization, salud, health, educación intercultural, intercultural education, elección y consulta previa, free and informed choice, which is obviously a huge issue for indigenous communities around the world. This is Yamilet, who is one of the participants of the program in July and August. There aren't subtitles, so I'll just, you can't really hear her anyway. Yamilet is saying that what she most enjoyed about the Pathways program during the 2 weeks there was learning about cultural identity. She says, in our rural communities, we are losing our practices, traditions, and language, and some young people are scared to speak Quechua when they go to Cusco, when they go to the town. She says, we shouldn't be embarrassed about speaking our language. Her peer, Leonel, was very keen to talk about his sense of pride in Quechua and his own cultural identity and his connection to his community. And in fact, on a number of occasions, he really dictated the way in which the programming of those 2 weeks took place, in that he recited poetry and really wanted to create the connection between his community in Guanaquite and the community of Corta where he was. And this is one of the ways in which he did it. And that poem performed in Quechua is a way also of honouring the land and his land and his sense of connection to the land. While during the course of those 2 weeks, it was also Dia de la Pachamama, or Day of Mother Earth, and the young people led a ceremony, and that involves coca leaves and offerings to the land. And so that was also formed a basis of how they presented and expressed their own sense of connection and cultural identity. And Leonel also took the opportunity at the end of the 2 weeks to perform to parents when they came. So going back to that theme of the whole family approach, this is his little sister and his parents, who I imagine were very, very proud of him in the way in which he really gathered together his peers to share in the experience of foregrounding that real pride and Quechua cultural identity. In UNICEF's guide, Engaged and Heard, which outlines guidelines on adolescent participation and civic engagement, I saw a lot of themes reflected the values and the strategic objectives as well of Amantani as an organisation. And I thought I would just mention a few of them, especially because implementing participatory approaches with Indigenous young people, it's so crucial to think about what the wider context is and what participatory approaches mean across the world and across different contexts, and then within the specific localized context of working with Quechua Indigenous youth. So in this table, which you might not be able to read super well, but the circled squares talk about civic engagement, meaningful and systemic participation, and then also empowering adolescents and their families as agents of change. So again, really thinking about that holistic family approach, and especially when it comes to that intercultural language and culture transmission, making sure that parents are part of the programs. And UNICEF talks about positive youth development as promoting participatory opportunities to enhance young people's communication, problem solving, negotiation skills, and build better relationships with peers, families, and communities. Indeed, Article 12 of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child enshrines participation as a fundamental human right. So with that background, it's also, I think, really crucial in our context at Amantani to think about the fact that non-formal education programs have a real role to play here, as often the school curriculum has a shortfall. It lacks the possibility of covering these bases and of ensuring a meaningful intercultural way of engaging young people and ensuring that their language and their culture is foregrounded, and that the programs can be led as well by their own initiatives, such as Leonel reciting poetry and getting his peers engaged in Dia de la Pachamama. Another way in which we engage parents in programming is having tinkuis throughout the year. Tinkui is another aspect of Ayni, and it means in Quechua to come together or to share. And the tinkuis are organized by parent and student councils. So once the new cohort comes through the Pathways program, the scholarships program begins with a student council and a parent council that represent the cohort of all of these parents, like Sunali here and her parents, who were at the beginning enjoying a game together and having a lot of opportunity to laugh and to understand about self-expression. And in a kind of traditionally timid and conservative culture that the Quechua culture often is, it was really great to see the opportunity for families to literally hold hands, and like in that image before of interculturality, holding hands and holding each other up and keeping community together. That for me really represents the overall idea of coming together and sharing within families and communities. And these are some of the young people who were there in July, and I thought that their kind of smiling faces also really transmit that sense of a building and budding self-confidence. These are young people who are just finishing their final year of school, and next year they will start in further and higher education programs with Amantani's scholarship support and ongoing tutoring and mentorship. And some of them will probably be part of the next student council alongside their parents, who will be invited in to make decisions about the progress of the organisation and the kind of focus of the team quiz that happen each year, or these gatherings together of both students, parents, tutors, and the team members of the organisation. So I mentioned the Meet My World program, which is another aspect, or before I talk about that, I'll just play you this nice video of some singing in Quechua, which happened during Ayni is all about sharing and having reciprocal relationships. I also wanted to extend the invitation to think about a project that we are about to launch with Amantani and hopefully universities around the UK, which is kind of the next stage of Meet My World, which began with these short films that we've just seen of Jenny and others. And now we are more focused on participatory photography. And so there are a number of young people who have cameras and have taken really amazing shots of nature, climate, of their local communities, of women and children in their communities. And we're launching this as a photo exhibition in order to showcase what rural community life looks like in the Andes. And this is something we're hoping to spearhead next year. And it will be the kind of next stage of the Meet My World program in terms of participatory approaches from Peru to the UK and beyond. And the Meet My World program, which in Quechua is Ixil Moyoita Rixinki, and that is a way in which together we can meet the world of young people in the Andes and exchange our ideas and come together for this process of solidarity and reciprocity that Ayni really enshrines within this concept of how we view the world and how which we can share in it together. So I'd be happy to share more about that. And in the meantime, I will leave my email address up here. Here are some of the sources which I have kind of mentioned in the presentation, especially the first one. Maria Elena Garcia talked about interculturalidad. And here's my email address so we can chat more about photo exhibitions and more. So in Quechua we say añay, in Spanish gracias, and thank you to everybody for being here.
Thank you very much, that was amazing. Should we?
I just realized, yeah, I couldn't join the meeting through the link. That's
Oh.
a bit strange. So let me just
Okay,
see
yeah.
if there have been things in the chat.
Yes.
If you go back to Teams.
Yeah.
And then we can see. There's
Loads
of stuff in the
Oh
chat.
goodness, thank you.
Someone's put in.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a transcription.
Oh no, that's a
That's a
transcription. That's a transcription. Yeah. Yeah.
So, oh yes. So I guess the question is whether anybody has any questions, except we're fighting with the transcription.
Can we turn the transcription off?
No, I don't know. Go to current.
If they put their hand up. Yeah.
Meeting
Yeah,
chat is
yeah.
okay. So Sarah, yes. Hi, Sarah. So I think, yes, if there's any questions from people at home, I'm standing next to the chat and I can read them out to Catriona. Are there any questions from the live audience? Yes.
Did you have a question? It sounded like you had a question.
I work in participation in youth service, so questions about like how you approach your youth work. So we use the Lundy model, which is true, where we organise to have like the space, which is comfortable, the voice which they share, and then you find an audience, and then you make that audience produce as much influence as possible. So space, audience, space, voice, audience, influence. In your like future club, so it seems as though your like influence has sort of like shifted on and on from like getting people into education and then like moving into the city, and now you're spreading to like other parts of the world. It seems that you're trying to find opportunities for people to get into education that's like that's all over the world. Has that been something that's been promoted by the young people, that that's the route that they want to take, and organizations follow that? And if so, are there sort of specific areas that your young people are interested in developing into, certain like areas that that they want to move into to work on academic regions?
In terms of this program in the Andes, in Guatemala, and they're young people from 2 specific districts near Cusco, and they all go to Cusco to study at universities or institutes there. So their focus is very much within their kind of regional realities. And one of the kind of values of Amantani is also that they study something which, they could go back to their community to do that work, as a teacher or as a nurse. In the Amazon Youth Project in Loreto, there's somebody who's studying hairdressing. There are, various different ways in which their regional connection is still very much kind of at the foreground as they continue on their, educational path. And then, our kind of expansion to the Amazon Youth Project happened in 2021. And that was kind of in relation to other kind of connections that were built as an organization, and that's also very localized with communities along the river Napo, which is north of Iquitos in the Amazon rainforest. So in both contexts, they're quite specific kind of localized projects, and the young people are quite focused on opportunities within their nearest city, which is in the case of Cusco or in Iquitos. And then as an organization, most of my colleagues are in Cusco, and that's where the office is, where they are based out of, and Porta is nearby. And that campus, which used to be a boarding house, is where they have the space where they were singing just now, and that's kind of sort of like the hub in terms of where the initial youth programs begin, and then where it kind of all expands out from. I don't know if that really answers your question. If there was another component to it that I could maybe expand on more.
Yeah, well, I guess it's interesting to hear about what their priorities are.
Yes.
It seems as though you're giving them, or rather the organisation, sort of like enabling them to like look at new opportunities. But they all want to stay within their regions and bring sort of like new skills, and it's interesting.
Yeah, and there is, for example, one student who has finished now her studies, and she's now working, and she was studying like food sciences equivalent degree, and she then got a job in a restaurant in a different part of Peru. And that's a kind of success story of her own initiative of where she wants to go, and there still is a continued kind of support in terms of our employability program, which is another aspect of the transitions program, in helping her with her CV development and her professional development. So where the young people go beyond this first stage of their being in their last year of school, the idea is that their world is opening, and there are opportunities wherever, as you say, like what their direction is, and that they can also dictate kind of their future paths. Which unfortunately, for most people in the Andes, and most young people in the Andes, often they don't have those possibilities to make decisions and to make them into a reality, because the opportunities to continue their studies are really quite few and far between, without the sort of financial and holistic support that Amantani can offer. Yeah.
Should we take an online?
Yeah, so Sarah in the chat. So Sarah, I believe, might even be in Peru now.
Oh, she could ask a question.
So her PhD project is, yes, in Peru, and she has a question for you. Yeah, I think you can see it in the chat about methodologies.
Yeah, hi Sarah. Do you want to ask it, Sarah, or shall I just read it?
Hello. I'm not in Peru, but I'm about to go to a Halloween disco, so I can't be with you. Sorry. It's not mine. It's a kids' disco. But my questions were. We're going in a few minutes, darling. Just about 10 minutes. Can I just ask my question? Yeah. So I had a couple I've got so many questions, Catriona, so I'm going to probably wrangle them out of you another time if we don't have time today. But I was specifically thinking about methodology, because it's obviously Amantani has got experience with using participatory techniques to include young people. So I was just curious as to whether you / Amantani have experienced any particular challenges or barriers concerning using participatory approaches like photography and video, and how you might have overcome those. And And my second question is sort of around the evolution of Amantani as an organisation and like why those changes have happened in terms of focusing on boarding houses initially and then moving now more into this space here, and what's kind of prompted that as charities change and grow. I'm always interested because, as you know, I've founded and directed an NGO on the sort of flip side of the coin for 15 years in Peru. So we've also evolved and changed over the years, and it's interesting to see why and how those changes happen.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I will try to make my response brief, given that you have other more important places to be with your kids. And I will also say that I do have a couple of team members who are there in the audience. So if anybody else, Jenny or Fran or Audrey wants to come in, then like please do after I've said something. Yeah, so I'll go with the second question. The changes in priorities and objectives, you know, like with LAF, your organization, Sarah, the focus initially was working with children, and as the attainment levels at both primary and secondary level in the community were greatly increased, the community in terms of local leaders and teachers were really kind of stuck about what happens to school leavers. You know, what are the opportunities for their studies beyond having this great success of finishing secondary school, but what comes next? So that was the moment of pivoting in 2017, 2018 to ensure that there were future opportunities. And the scholarships program, both the Pathways program and the scholarships program, came out of that question from local leaders. What can Amantani do to support young people now that they are able to reach their schools, both physically and metaphorically, and ensure that they can continue their studies. So really it was kind of a direct ask from the community, and that enabled the kind of shift in perspective, in objective of kind of target population of working more with 18 to 25-year-olds rather than children at school age. And then in terms of particular challenges, I think that as with many small NGOs, and again, Sarah, you'll know so much about this, but as with many small NGOs, kind of the main challenges are often time and resources. So, working with young people and ensuring that, there's access to good cameras, that there's, the kind of tutoring and mentorship that is, needed, especially that mentorship kind of component. It's challenging to have the time, it's challenging to find the resources, and especially when the main focus of the organization is ensuring that kind of scholarship support and the financial support alongside that kind of holistic tutoring, the workshops, and all of those aspects. So I think that finding a balance across a number of different programs that we offer, as well as working with Quechua artisans, it all sort of comes under that sort of larger time and resource banner, I would say. But maybe somebody, I don't know if Jenny, if you want to say anything else, or Rodri, or Fran, I'm not quite sure who's there, I can't really see. It's okay if you don't, I can tell you don't.
Yes, I think, Catriona, thank you everybody, but for language is Jenny or Francesca is in for this. Francesca.
Yes, I think, yes, hi. I think that, well, I agree with Catriona's answers. I think that when it comes to, for example, the part of the changes in objectives, it's something that we have always worked with the communities as well. So every decision we've made at Amantani has always been in close consideration with the participants and their parents and the communities, and we are working for that to continue as well. So that's something we always take into account, their active participation in all of our decisions. And regarding the other question about the challenges faced in photography and video, I think that one of the other challenges is always privacy. And just to mention, every single person that participates in our Meet My World photos and videos always has to sign a commitment and authorization so that they know where we are going to be using those photos and videos, and they are completely aware of that. So I think that that's another important issue to take into account. But yes, we second what Catriona has said before.
Thank you. And I'll just introduce you. The Francesca who was just speaking is our communications coordinator, and she's based in Lima. And Rodrigo Bustos is our executive director, and he's also based in Lima, but tends to be everywhere else in Peru at the same time. So thank you both for stepping in there as well. Thank you. And thank you, Sarah, for the questions.
Are there any more questions from the floor? I have questions.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much for the talk. It's amazing. It's amazing to see just young people being so engaged and so enthusiastic. And yeah, so I have two questions. First of all, how's your Quechua? And my second question is, I guess, I love this idea of interculturality. How do you approach and frame, I guess, sort of the other aspects of culture that they're exposed to? Specifically, just seeing all those young people together, nobody's on their phones. Like, how do you get them away from their phones? How do you get them away from social media? How do you get them to focus, sort of on the cultural activities that you're promoting? And how do you frame it? And do you frame it as sort of like, this is, your phones are bad, or do you kind of try to incorporate tech and social media and these things into their activities and their day?
Yeah, I would say that with young people, and I'm sure that you probably have things to say on this as well, is that with young people, you can't really get them away from their phones. Like they're going to be on their phones, and there are also positive and productive ways to use social media and to use the internet. And that I think that that's probably the focus in terms of ensuring that there are kind of healthy relationships that are happening in person, but then there's also a way of engaging with social media and the internet, which is not necessarily like distracting them or taking them away from the kind of the topic that they're addressing. It is true that they weren't super on their phones in general while we were kind of there. In terms of my connection with Amantani, I work remotely most of the time as fundraising manager, so I'm sure that the tutors who are working with them every day and they have their tutee groups, might have other things to say around like phone use. But I think that in general, these are young people who are the first in their families to go to university to study. Their parents and their grandparents and their community members have had totally different experiences, and they all are so enthusiastic and excited about being there. And they know that they are one of very few to have those kinds of opportunities, and they're not going to waste them. So that's really what I kind of felt when I was there, that these are young people who are really making the most of the opportunities that are being extended to them, and they really want to kind of shape their own path, and they're taking on those opportunities. And then another wee anecdote, which happened in Iquitos when Rodrigo and I went to visit the Amazon Youth Project. We played some videos on YouTube of a Peruvian cumbia band in Scotland, and they were so excited about it, and they immediately wanted to show the kind of K-pop from Korea that they're watching, and it was this, that's also an intercultural exchange of, their K-pop in the Peruvian jungle and, cumbia from Peru in Scotland, and that was a moment of, yes, like YouTube and social media, but a real kind of possibility of exchange. And again, like young people who are just totally engaged. I gave a presentation on fundraising, and I kind of thought, I want to know about fundraising, but nobody was on their phones, and they all had loads of questions. So again, I think it's just that real appetite for learning. Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you for the question.
And do you speak Quechua?
I learned a wee bit when I was volunteering with Sarah's charity Laugh in Cusco in 2016, and I did classes. But now I live mostly in Guatemala, where they speak a Mayan language called Ixil, and so that should probably be my focus now in terms of indigenous languages. But Quechua is such a beautiful language, and it holds within it so much complexity, like the idea of Ayni. So I would love to learn it at some point if I'm spending more time in Peru, for sure. Yeah. Thank you.
Are there any other questions at home? put anything in the chat or switch on the mic and speak.
Oh, yeah.
Hello, I did put a question in the chat. I was just asking about yes, the scope of intercultural education. Does that continue at the level of higher education, or are there kind of, does it happen throughout, the high school, and then is there a sort of a cutoff point, and how do they manage that transition?
Yeah, I might also direct that question to a colleague who might know more, but I would just say that my immediate response to that is that probably within the curriculum and within kind of institutes and universities, there are programs that require Quechua courses within, like, I think within studying education, for example, within studying sort of foreign languages, I think you have to take Quechua in the university. But I do think that's where sort of non-formal education programs come in that, the kind of possibility for continuing to celebrate and learn and share Quechua in, for example, our office, which is called Pacarihuayna. And in Pacarihuayna, perhaps these young people who are studying in Cusco are having more exposure to Quechua than they might be within their institution. So that's kind of where a non-profit has the capacity to really sort of create opportunities and open up those doors that I think probably within the curriculum is not so emphasized. And there are critiques of intercultural bilingual education within Peru as well, in terms of how far does it actually go and in what ways does it mainstream indigenous language learning or sideline it. So that's, kind of a whole other thing within the school system. I think that my colleague Jenny is also writing something, so that might be related to.
Yeah, Thea said she put a message in the chat, but I don't see anything in the chat.
It was just that question.
Okay.
And I guess I'm also interested in intercultural education in the sense of, is it more than just a question of language?
Is it mostly just a question of language, or are there other aspects brought in? Is that what you just said, Thea?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'm just going to read Jenny's response. Jenny's my colleague, Trusts and Foundations Manager at Amantani, and she says, my limited understanding of the further education institutions here is that there is not much focus on interculturality. Some students do learn Quechua, but more focuses on other languages like English, which, I'm sure, is kind of expected across the board, not, desired, but expected in terms of that focus on English as the sort of driver of sort of economic priorities. I mean, from my experience in Peru, also kind of drawing on my experience in Guatemala with Mayan communities, in Peru and specifically in Cusco, in which there's quite a large percentage of the population, I think it's around 60% of the population are Quechua speakers, and there is a celebration of cultural identity, like, for example, Leonel reciting poetry or dances, folkloric dances, that are really part of the kind of fabric and the makeup of that society, and it's still a real point of celebration beyond language and the kind of linguistic acquisition, and it moves into also celebrating cultural identity and food identities as well, and celebrating agriculture and the land and having a real respect for where that comes from. And in other parts and in other indigenous communities of Latin America, I think that has been broken down and chipped away at, certainly in Guatemala, in ways that in Peru are still very central and important to the ways in which people live their lives and relate to the world and the community around them. So I think that interculturality as a concept does go beyond the sort of linguistic connections, but I think within the school system that might well be lacking. I really recommend the book by Maria Elena Garcia, because that specifically talks about intercultural bilingual education within Peruvian schools. So it's kind of interesting to see what might well be lacking there between sort of non-formal participatory programs and a kind of school curriculum, which is really bound within the colonial context still. So, yeah.
I think there's one more question in the chat.
How do you see the project developing? Could there be cross-national exchange possibilities with other schools in, for example, Scotland? Thank you. Yeah, well, you never say never, why not? I think that we do have connections with schools in Lima, and I know that, Sarah with LAF, you've developed connections with schools in the UK, between Peru and the UK. I don't know, Sarah, if that's something that has also transpired in things like exchanges between students themselves, or if it tends to be a fundraising exchange. I'm drawing you in to answer this question for me, but I'm curious to know as well about LAF's experience, which is also a UK registered Peruvian charity. So, but maybe Sarah's gone to the Halloween party. But yeah, perhaps. It's always great, especially within the kind of intercultural perspectives, to think about the ways in which young people can learn from each other across borders, across oceans, right?
Yeah. I'm thinking of the Mehri community in Yemen. We could have a link between the Mehri Centre, where we start bringing children and their parents and particularly their mums into the centre.
Yeah.
I think we have a lot to learn from this.
Yes, it's very interesting work. So as I am a member of Amantani Language Center, it's in my hometown. So we have to learn many things from this project for help students and younger students and children to promote or to utilize their language, or also how to use their skills in their language. I really read about this. Your project is very interesting. I think it will help me to do many things in my native language in the community in Mahara and Yemen. So thank you very much for this.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
That's great. Thank you. Well, I would love to learn more about that context as well, and I'm sure there are things that Amantani could draw on from the Yemeni context too.
Even the concept, you use some concepts from your stuff, so share it with our mind.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we'd find it quite beautiful.
For the children or something like that.
Yeah.
I like it.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Are there any more questions?
Any more questions from the remote audience?
Is someone talking?
No, someone's talking.
I have a question. So it seems as though you're working quite closely between both young people and their parents or carers. I've often found that when I'm talking to a young person, their parents there, they express quite different opinions to when their parent isn't there.
Yeah.
So how is it that you get around that, or is the relationship maybe different in Peru than it is in the UK?
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, I think when the young people have gone through the Pathways program and they become part of the scholarships program, each young person is assigned a tutor. And so they have tutor groups, and those are smaller groups kind of within a larger cohort, and they meet both within that kind of smaller circle with their tutors. They have a WhatsApp group, they're often in touch on WhatsApp with the tutors, and then they also have parent and student meetings and one-on-one meetings. So I think that the time with like young person, parent and tutor is kind of much less than the time which is also engaging the young person one-on-one and with their peers, because as you say, those are like all sorts of different dynamics with peers, by themselves, with parents, with the rest of the Amantani team. From what I can gather of how the young people interact in Catriona in the office and that kind of youth hub, then a lot of that is the young people by themselves. There's a kitchen, they come in and they cook together, the team members kind of come and go, and the sort of focus is really on their own sense of community within the group of scholarship students, of young people there. And then engaging their parents and ensuring that their parents kind of are part of the process, especially through the parent councils. That's also kind of parent-led, because the parent councils have to kind of take the role and the initiative in organising social events or making the trip, because Porta, where the parents live, is a wee bit far from Cusco, and so there's also kind of geographical barriers there, language barriers. Some of the parents don't speak Spanish, or they might not speak very good Spanish. So there's kind of a lot of different dynamics to navigate, but it does, you know, I think that what I've seen, and I would imagine that my colleagues would agree, that there's, you know, such a sense of kind of family motivation and sort of pride and energy for their children to be the first in the families to study, that parents tend to be, you know, really like quite supportive in that process. However, they've had really different experiences growing up and they don't necessarily understand the intricacies of, you know, application forms and, you know, financial documents and all of that kind of thing. So it's a lot of like emotional, socio-emotional support, and then also the kind of administrative support and the bureaucratic sort of things that our tutors are also dealing with on a daily basis. Yeah. Thank you for the question.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we can probably log off.
Yeah, well, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks,
That was
Janet.
absolutely fascinating. And thank you to everyone who's joined us online and to you as well. So, a round of applause.
Thank you.
We've got recording instructions.